Welcome to episode 2 of Center Freaks. I'm your host, Sam Clements.
And I'm still not Sam Clements. I'm JD. And we've got quite a bit to talk about, Sam.
Indeed we do. Yes, there's a whole laundry list of stuff that happened. First of all, how was your week?
It was good. I had a great week. As you know, the first episode of our show went live this past week, and we've gotten some really great feedback. Definitely both on Twitter and through the YouTube comments that we're certainly keeping up with. We've got good feedback, and also offline, I've gotten some text and other communications about the show, and I'm really happy to see that people are engaging. One particular engagement I'll pull out, and I think he might have been joking, but I thought, you know what, it's still it's a good thing for us to cover one more time. Doug, who on Twitter is at DesRon94, DSRON 94, asked, do you have an audio only RSS feed? And again, he might have been joking because we talked about it last show, but I'll bring it up again for those who may be tuning in for the first time. Sam and we are going to keep this podcast as educational as possible, and that will often involve screen sharing, and which is really something we can only do in video format. And we've just made the decision that rather than trying to create an audio feed plus the video feed plus, and figure out hosting and all those other things, we can instead focus that time and energy on providing content for you guys. So right now, the only place that you're going to find Center Freaks is here on the YouTube channel. If that changes in the future, we'll be certain to highlight it. And I absolutely understand why you guys would like it. But in general, I think you're going to very quickly begin to see benefits from actually watching the video. You won't always having to be staring at my ugly mug and Sam's rather attractive mug.
Oh, geez.
There'll be lots to share with you guys. So with that said, I hope that answers the question, and both for Doug, but also for anyone else who might be tuning in for the first time. Sam, how was your week?
It was good. It was good. Had obviously was trying to keep my finger on the pulse of the comments on Twitter about the show, and just generally tried to keep my head above water. You know how the weeks go, work and blah and travel, and no shortage of stuff to be done. That's for sure. I spent a couple days out in lovely Memphis, so I got that going for me.
Oh, nice. Memphis. Did you get any good food while you were there?
No.
Well, then why would you go? Oh, work. That's right.
Work. Yes.
The W word.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, so last time we talked about WLPC a little bit. We talked about the fact that you and I were both talking. Did you make any opportunity to develop your talk this week?
Yeah, no.
That depends.
That depends. No. It's a pretty clear no. Although having said that, I guess the way I create content is less like make an outline, then flesh it out, and all that fun stuff. I work on it in my head over a series of weeks, and then I sit down and usually get most of a fully baked content, whether that be a presentation or a blog post or whatever, usually just comes out in one fairly dedicated focused burst, because it's been being written for the past 2-3 weeks in my head. So I'm in the writing it in my head phase. I have some one or two little things that I want to make sure that I highlight in my presentation there, but and those are written down, but by and large I still don't know what PowerPoint template I'm going to use.
Oh wait, we do need a presentation, don't we?
Yeah.
I should probably start on that. Yeah.
And you've got one coming up too, yeah?
Yeah, I do. Saturday morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. after getting about 4 hours of sleep, wide awake for some reason, and the talk is what was rolling through my mind. And the hardest problem I had, I think I expressed it a little bit last week, was that I was trying to figure out essentially how to tell the story, right? How to take the information and put it into a format that will keep people engaged. And I feel like I got the recipe for that. So I've got a general outline, and really that's the hardest part for me. Anytime I'm developing a talk, the outline is the hardest part. So I got up probably around 5:30, finally climbed out of bed, was ready to start writing things down. and sat in my sunroom, watched the sun come up, and took a bunch of notes. And so I think I'm in a good place with it. Nice. I should probably this week start to finalize it, and really the next step is the PowerPoint, right? So I'll start working on the presentation and kind of move from the outline to the presentation, and I think I'll be probably by the end of the week I'll be ready to go with that. It'll be time to start going through it to see if I can fit it within the 10-minute window.
The 10 minutes, yeah. Well, so we're recording on the 3rd, and so it starts on the 15th, right, with the boot camps, and I guess the actual conference starts on the 18th, 17th, something like that.
I believe so. Yeah.
A few days later, yeah. So we're down to the 10 to right around the 2-week window, right? Yeah.
We're getting close. 2 weeks from today, we will be in class. In fact, so
that's right. I'm very much looking forward to it. Which class are you taking?
I am taking CWSP. Tom Carpenter's teaching it.
That's right.
It's I'm as I think I mentioned last episode. I don't have the CWNE yet, but I'm working in that direction. So felt like that would be a good boot camp to take. And I think. So in last year at WLPC, there was actually a testing center at WLPC, but there were not enough people who showed interest or who scheduled exams last year. So that's not something that's happening this week. But I think I may, and this is a little tip for people, I may actually schedule an exam at one of the testing centers in Tempe or Phoenix. Because number one, I'm in addition to working on talks and other things and actual work, I am studying before the boot camp. And I would like the thing I found in the past is when you leave WLPC, you're kind of overwhelmed a little bit with all of the information that you've consumed. And so I think I may go ahead and schedule that exam. So I may even be walking around WLPC with a new certification under my belt. We'll see.
So you're going to do, that's a really, really good idea. And of course, it didn't dawn on me that obviously there are Pearson VUE testing centers all over the states. So there's got to be one local there somewhere.
That's what I'm thinking.
So you would think that you would do it like the morning of the actual conference registration, like the day after the boot camp, the morning of type of thing.
Yeah, probably. Or maybe even very late, the last day of the boot camp. Again, if I wasn't already doing studying, I'd probably be a little bit more resistant to that idea. But since I'm already going through a lot of material, I feel like a lot of the material I have a pretty good handle on. I think that may be the plan.
Well, and it's Tom. It's hard to go wrong. So
sure, absolutely.
I think most of those are you are probably pretty well equipped to take the test shortly after the boot camp. So that's,
exactly.
Unlike I've heard a lot of boot camps where they're like, this is going to come in. You're going to basically get an outline of where to go next. And I don't think these are like that. I think these are structured very, very much to enable you to do what you got to do. So
right, absolutely. I think 2 years ago, last year I took ECSE. 2 years prior I took CWAP with Peter, and that's one of those I often tell people if you're thinking about doing a boot camp and don't know which one, that's just such a good boot camp. Mm-hmm. Peter is one of maybe the top 3 people I can think of that I would want to take that boot camp from. And does an excellent job. So that's another one that I generally recommend people take if they haven't already.
Well, did you see Peter's thing on Twitter this week about the capturing packets?
Yeah, I thought that was rather interesting, and it really ties into WLPC in a lot of in a lot of ways. Why don't you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, so the WLAN PI, those that have been going to WLPC for any amount of time have seen this little nano computer basically that Jerry Alla ultimately I think spec together, and he's got it's got the Comfast adapter, and mine's over on the other side of the room, but it's basically a small computer that's about an inch by an inch by an inch or so, and it's got a USB port on it, and you populate it with I think the Comfast adapter I think is the adapter of choice, and you can do all sorts of fun stuff with it. And Jerry maintains the software image that goes on it, and I think that he's even working on a bunch of stuff to update us all at WLPC on it as well. And so there's got to be hundreds of these little things running around all over the place. And that's sort of the touch to WLPC. But I think somebody ultimately commented about using it as a packet capture tool, and I think that's really what caught Peter's attention, because the adapter is it's an AC adapter that supports up to 80 megahertz wide channels. And so I think the comment that one of the people that somebody made was, hey, if I've got an adapter that's 80 megahertz wide, I can capture 4 discrete 20 megahertz wide channels as long as they're all within that 80 megahertz wide chunk. And he had posted some packet captures about how he had used his WLAN PI. He had started a capture on 80 megahertz wide, and he was seeing packets from all 20 megahertz channels that composed that 80 megahertz wide. And that's what I think really kicked off the conversation as far as Peter was concerned.
Right. Yeah. And Peter, I think the reason that Peter's so good at teaching the AP class is Peter is very, very analytical, right? He loves getting into the nitty gritty and the details. And you can tell if you read this blog post, which of course will be down in the comments or in the description, rather, in the show description. You can tell by the way that Peter describes his setup and how he tested this. Exactly how analytical Peter is, and he's one of those people that I think always contributes good content to the community, and he does that here. We're talking through exactly how protocol analyzers receive frames, and how those kind of work their way up the stack, how the WLAN PI captures frames, and how it's a little different. He kind of works through a lot of this information. And it's really interesting, the results. Now, sadly, what he found was that the COMFAST adapter isn't capable of catching every frame across 4 channels. It's just simply not possible to do that. But it was able to capture some. So it's worth looking at. It's definitely worth reading for anyone who has a WLAN PI or maybe at WLPC. Attending the sessions around those. I actually, I think, I guess 3 years ago, I believe everyone received the kind of first version of that built on the Odroid, right?
Yeah.
So I've got mine. I use it quite often. I've used mine for quite a few things. In fact, I got back from that WLPC and immediately figured out how Jerry and I worked together to figure out how to put the latest version of spec tools on there. So with one of the, say, Metageek adapters, you could connect up and see both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And so there's a lot of really interesting uses for those. In fact, I just about 2 weeks ago ordered the latest version from the supplier so that I could put together the latest version and make use of what comes out of this year's WLPC. So looking forward to that. But we mentioned Metageek just a second ago. There was some news this week from those guys.
Yeah, there sure was. They have a what is it? It's a discrete adapter. It looks like, right? It looks like a battery powered box that's that looks and feels very, very similar to the Osseum hardware. Is that did I see that right?
Yeah. Metageek announced the Wi-Spy Air was what they announced, and you're absolutely right. When you look at the hardware specs, it is very similar to the Wi-Fi 5X from Osseum. Or Osseum, is that right?
Osseum, yeah. Those guys.
Yes, those guys. The other guys, as far as specs and whatnot. But the big difference, though, is that rather than being a device that plugs into, for example, an iPad or something, it's actually Bluetooth. There's a Bluetooth connection between it and your phone. Or iPad, I would assume, tablet, I should say. And so rather than having to be directly connected, it's passing data and has the ability to connect to a wider range of devices. And of course, to be able to support that, it's got a battery solution, a rechargeable battery solution that's part of it.
So many questions there, it's not even funny.
Yeah, there really are. The big thing, I think, the first question a lot of people are going to ask here is speed and resolution, right? Because anytime you start talking about spectrum analyzers, that's kind of the important specs. And so from a resolution perspective on 2.4 gigahertz, the resolution is 333 kilohertz. At 5 gigahertz, that jumps up quite a bit. It jumps up to 1.665 megahertz, or 1665 kilohertz. So it's quite a bit wider from when you go into 5 gigahertz. And then from a speed perspective, it'll scan the 2.4 band in 250 milliseconds, and then the 5 gigahertz band in 1250 milliseconds.
Well, it includes Wi-Fi radio too, doesn't it? Did I see that?
You're absolutely right. It does. And I believe there's also some capabilities to do some packet capture and that kind of thing. Right. Well, let's go to price first. I think that's going to be the that's the other big decision point here. So the price for the Metageek Wi-Spy Air is $12.99, which is fairly, in my opinion, is fairly expensive, for what you're getting, and only really because as we said, it's kind of similar specs to the OCM Wi-Fi, and when you start getting to that price point, then you start comparing it to kind of the other things that are out there, right? It runs, I guess it's between a half to a third of the cost of, for example, maybe the biggest thing that people are going to compare this to would be the EchoHealth side check. EchoHealth
side check. Wow, that's a good one.
Wow. The EchoHealth Sidekick, right? I mean, that's definitely the elephant in the room when we start talking about spectrum analysis, and we start talking about being able to capture packets and things on a separate device, right? Especially when you start talking about looking at connecting to devices, such as an iPad, such as an iPhone, which isn't something that EchoHealth currently has the capability of. But I think it's a pretty well-known public secret, considering they've literally had iPads at, for example, Cisco Live last year, and have it on their website. That's certainly something that's coming. So when you start comparing it, that's okay. So we're going to call it 3 times the cost, and that's about right, isn't it?
Or so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So about 3 times the cost when we look at resolution. Rather than 333 kilohertz on the 2.4 side, it's 39 kilohertz. On the 5 gigahertz side, rather than the 1665 megahertz, it's still 39 kilohertz. From a speed side, it scans both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, the entire band, if I remember correctly, 25 times a second. Does that sound right to you?
It does.
So there's a huge difference here from a performance perspective, and you have to start asking yourself the question, where that price performance thing is. Sam, I know you've got EchoHealth Sidekick. What's your feelings and on the on this device? Do you feel like if you had the Sidekick, or if you didn't have the Sidekick, what would you be asking yourself?
Well, so it's as with all tools, I think it's what tool A fits your technical need, and B, what tool can you use to further your whatever it is you're looking to do, and then of course meets your budget. And there's an interesting sort of hierarchy being built where we sort of have we very much have the Sidekick at the high end of that tools list, and then as we come down, I sort of look at the AirCheck being an interesting tool to talk about in the context there. Then we have, of course, the what is it called again? It's called the Wi-Spy Air. Is that right?
Yes.
Wi-Fi Air. And then I think as you even come further down the list, you have the discrete components like the DBX, or even the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, or even Jerry's WLAN PI. And so you start to look at all those have different capabilities, they have different specifications. The AirCheck doesn't have spectrum analysis. There's different things that each one will do. But in the pricing structure, it's about, can you do your job efficiently with the capabilities of the tools that you have, and of course the only person that can answer that is you, dear listener, watcher. And so If I didn't have a Sidekick, the Sidekicks, there's some heavy lifting there, no doubt about it, from a capital expense perspective. And I think that's one of the interesting things about the Wi-Spy Air is that it looked like the software. Maybe was the software separate, or was there a subscription service for the software? I didn't quite pick up on the how the software was consumed for the Wi-Spy Air. If that was going to be like a recurring revenue type of a thing for them, or if that was a iOS app that's downloaded for free and you unlock it. I didn't quite pick up on exactly how the software is going to work. But when you look at total cost of ownership for your tools, obviously it's going to be important to know, hey, is that $1,200 you're spending, is that hardware, is it plus software? How long is it going to last? What's maintenance? What's support? If I'm going to be using this tool for 5 years and, X number of dollars of that is software that I'm going to be forced into rebuying over and over again, or paying a subscription fee for over and over again, as opposed to the Sidekick, where the software support and maintenance is optional. ESS doesn't stop working if you don't pay your renewal. You just don't get the updates. So there's a lot of consumption questions that I think sort of filter to the top of my mind about how the products work and what is the most full featured that you can get to get your job done within the pricing envelope. And I know there are a lot of people who are really reluctant to jump on the subscription services bandwagon. And so if I look at them from a consumption model perspective, in my head, the AirCheck sort of stands out as being the one that's the easiest to talk about, because it's the, whatever the list price, I think, is what, $2,000 or something like that for the AirCheck or so. So it's more than the Air, but less than a Sidekick, but it's completely standalone. And if you don't pay for support and services, the screen's still going to turn on and you're still going to be able to mash the buttons. Right? You don't get spectrum analysis, but you do get packet capture. And so that's sort of the bbest, I think, all-in-one tool. But if that's too heavy lifting for you, then of course you have to come down that stack. And then I think as more and more people are getting started, the entry level tools, I think what the Wi-Spy Air is, while it feels like it's priced high, I don't know that I feel like it's priced out of accessibility's range for a lot of people. I wish we would have better resolution in the product, but if we're targeting it at the below the AirCheck, below the Sidekick user, then, or above the WLAN PI user, that's obviously a pretty wide gap from a pricing perspective, but it's priced right in there.
Yeah, that's a really valid point, and for especially someone who's kind of working their way into wireless and first begins understanding what a spectrum analyzer does, and then starts going, okay, well, maybe I do need a spec in, right? Maybe looking at something in Wi-Fi Explorer or something along those lines isn't enough for me, right? And when they start looking, then okay, I can understand at that point why this could be a really good step into a spectrum analyzer. Yeah. I don't have an Ekahau Sidekick. So let me put that out there. I'm an Ekahau user, no question about it, but I don't have a Sidekick. When I start looking at $1,300 for this versus the Sidekick and start looking at comparisons, I do see a pretty compelling case there. I am worried about the resolution. Especially on the 5 gigahertz side, because that 1 point, basically a meg and a half. We're going to call it a megahertz and a half resolution is fairly wide in my opinion. Yeah. I think I'm more concerned about that than I am the actual speed of the device personally. But those are kind of the questions. I will say one interesting thing that it has as well is it has an RPSMA connector. So if you have an RPSMA antenna or an RPTNC to RPSMA adapter, it would actually be really interesting to use with antenna alignment, right? Because, for example, if you think about a point-to-point connection, trying to make certain that everything is perfectly aligned, and also even looking to see, okay, what sources of interference does that antenna see? I could really see it being useful there, and that could be a really interesting use case for this tool. Of course, if you're doing any type of adapters, you have to take in that dB loss that you're going to see in the adapter. It's another interesting use case, and I'm really kind of interested in seeing where this goes and how it develops, for sure.
Well, the thing that you said when we were talking about the specs of the box that stood out as my mind is I really, really want to see how they pull this off is Bluetooth or BLE connection to your host device. That obviously runs in 2.4 gigahertz, and so
right.
We rely on our tools to give us an accurate picture of what's around us, and if we're using that same spectrum, if we're consuming spectrum in order to use the tool. The upshot of that is I wonder what the effectiveness is going to be when you're using it by way of Bluetooth for visibility in the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, right? Because you're going to be listening to all that Bluetooth traffic.
I'm curious to see if are they doing any type of filtering? Is there some way that they can understand what type of signal they're generating, right? And using scanning that particular portion of the band whenever they're not actively talking in Bluetooth on that portion. How are they handling that? That's a really great point. I'll actually tell a really funny story about myself. Early on in Wi-Fi, we always make we make mistakes. And I did a walking survey of a very large warehouse one time, the entire time using Bluetooth headphones.
But
that brings this exact point up, right? And kind of and speaks to that problem. And I got back and I'm looking at it. I'm trying to understand why I'm seeing this really
Bluetooth everywhere.
Yeah, this noise floor. Why is the noise floor so high? It doesn't make sense. And thankfully, it was, I was still there. I wasn't when I got back to my desk. I was still there and put in some extra hours in resurveying this warehouse. Yeah. Without the Bluetooth headphones, and that was one of the reasons whenever the iPhone lost the headphone adapter, I was like, no.
It's hard to be brave.
Right. Yeah. So sometimes it hurts. But that's a great point. I will, this actually, the Wi-Spy Air brought up an interesting point, and this is one of those conversations I would love. Maybe we can get UC on some time to talk about this. As we mentioned, the Ekahau resolution is very tiny. It's 39 kilohertz. Yeah. And what's interesting about that is when we think about Wi-Fi, we've got 52, every 20 megahertz channel is divided into 52 subtones, right? And each subtone is 312.5 kilohertz.
Yeah.
So when we say we're scanning 39 kilohertz, 39 kilohertz chunk, we're actually scanning each and every subtone multiple times. What is that, like 8 times or something?
Something like that. Yeah.
It's so I'm really curious on what the need is to go so far below the subtone level, or subchannel level, right? Carrier level, maybe it's a better way of saying it. Well past that 312.5 kilohertz. I could see maybe cutting it in half, right? Maybe even a quarter. But it's interesting to me that they went so low, and I would love to kind of hear their thoughts on why they needed to get that resolution.
I would think that the answer would revolve around something like because when you use a spectrum analyzer, you're not necessarily looking at Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. You could be looking at all sorts of stuff that is not Wi-Fi and isn't subdivided like Wi-Fi is. And so if you look at, Bluetooth doesn't have the same resolution. There are a bunch of narrowband interferers that don't have the same, resolution. And so I think the answer would probably be something along those lines where, we go that low so that we can see those other things that we may not be able to see otherwise if we were trying to align with Wi-Fi. I would guess.
I totally hear that reasoning, but when I think about a lot of the interferers, like if we're talking about something that's interfering on a subtone, ultimately, Wi-Fi is resilient enough; it doesn't care, right? I mean, that's the reason you have the
right, you have subtones.
And the reason that we have those tones that are used for checking phase and all of that other all those other things, right? There's a lot of, just like all other aspects of Wi-Fi, there's a lot of resiliency built in and a lot of checking built in. But it was one of those things that suddenly when I was looking at those specs, I was like, that's interesting. When we look at the resolution of the Wi-Spy Air at 303 kilohertz on 2.4, that is very close to that, subtone. They're almost scanning a subtone, but they're even wider than a subtone. So it was just something that occurred to me.
We'll have to add it to the list of things to ask UC.
UC, if you're watching, that's the question I have for you at WLPC. Oh, and also, when can I get a sidekick?
A sidekick, yeah. I hear they're in stock now.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Yeah. If only my bank account had that in stock.
Had that availability.
Yes. So, Sam, I don't know if you saw it or not. This goes back to the conversation we had in episode 1 regarding 802.11ax clients. David Coleman, Mr. Multipath, over on Twitter, put out on the 2nd of February a link, and it actually it goes to an article on Phone Arena that highlights the FCC filings for Samsung's 2019 devices. And what's interesting is it definitely indicates that they are 802.11ax compliant devices. So that, literally less than a week after our show came out, we see, I guess that's the first official AX client. Is that right?
Well, so, and we know that the Dell launched or soft launched an acknowledgement that they were going to have a laptop that had 807AX in it. But the interesting thing is, so I'm looking at this article now, and of course this is all phone rumors based on the FCC filing. But the thing that I find most interesting is, and I think you maybe inadvertently mentioned it, is that the phone is going to come out being 807AX compliant, and there's been this big conversation around AX clients that are coming, and are these really AC Wave 2 clients that have some AX extensions added to them, or are they a full-on native AX client? And so the interesting thing that I see about this article that Coleman posted was it called out 807AX, but it didn't call out compatible or compliant or anything along those lines. It actually calls out Wi-Fi 6, which is the Wi-Fi Alliance new marketing term for 802.11ax. And so when I see the Wi-Fi Alliance, and like it or hate it, there's obviously a lot of conversation around Wi-Fi 5 versus 6 and the marketing terms and all of that. This is one of the benefits of using Wi-Fi 6 as a term to coin a client's capabilities, and that if it's going to be certifiable by the Wi-Fi Alliance as 802 or as Wi-Fi 6, then it has to meet some sort of baseline level of requirement from a features perspective, from a protocol perspective. And so when I look at somebody that says, when I look at this, I think the third paragraph down says, according to the data, Samsung's 2019 flagships will support Wi-Fi 6. And then in brackets 802.11ax, it signals to me that this isn't going to be one of those half-baked clients that comes out that's a Wave 2 client that has some extensions that maybe support some things here and there. Well, Wi-Fi 6 in my book signals that it's going to be a fully compliant, all features in Wi-Fi 6 client. And that's the thing that I think stands out in my mind. I mean, we all assumed that there were going to be clients coming, but this says they're not only are they coming, they're coming very, very quickly. In fact, I think the article goes as far as to say the expected release date is March 8th, and I think the announcement date is February 20th. Yeah. So this will actually be during WLPC. And I think that's really, really interesting, because not only are they coming, they're coming really, really quickly. Not only are they coming really, really quickly, everybody's sort of assumption that the first clients on the market are going to be these hybrid, sort of mostly AX compliant. Looks like there are probably going to be some of those, I would imagine, but it looks like Samsung's just going to blow right past that. I think that's a really, really intriguing thing. A, we have some very, very specific dates. B, we have some very, very specific features that are being called out by the article. And it looks like they're the light. And now I'm not a Samsung guy. I don't know much about Android phones. So the article says what, S10e, S10, and S10 Plus, because that makes sense. I don't know.
Sure, absolutely. It doesn't sound at all like what you and I are used to with the iPhone.
Yeah, the X and the XS and Max and Plus and no,
completely
not
confused.
Completely, yeah.
I think that's those are all really incredible points there. That Wi-Fi 6, you're absolutely right. For them to put that on the phone indicates that they have passed the requirements for Wi-Fi 6, right? That they are fully,
or they have a high degree of confidence they will be able to pass the requirements.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So that's some really interesting news. Really appreciate Mr. Coleman putting that out there, and kind of happy to see that happen so soon after our conversation about it. I think going back to our conversation there is no question now. I mean, I believe you said that there would be a 30-day window that we would just start to see announcement after announcement after announcement. And this could very well be the beginning of that window. I believe it to be.
Well, and so here's the thing that just sort of dawned on me as we're talking through this, because the Wi-Fi Alliance term, the Wi-Fi Alliance embracing the Wi-Fi 4, 5, and 6 numbering scheme, it just dawned on me why that is, and obviously mass market consumerization, easy to say stuff, but when we look across the market at Wi-Fi devices that have not gone through the Wi-Fi Alliance certification, meaning clients that we can lay our hands on today that don't include the WFA logo or the Wi-Fi logo. There's one really, really major manufacturer out there that simply doesn't deal with Wi-Fi Alliance certification. And that's these guys. All right. That's an Apple logo, by the way. And so the interesting thing about that is the MacBook you're using, my iPhone, the iPads, none of those are really Wi-Fi Alliance certified, which, certainly hasn't hurt them in the market. When was the last time you said, I'm not going to buy an iPhone because it doesn't have the Wi-Fi Alliance logo on it? But what this is going to do is this is going to create a situation where we have the major competitor to the iPhone saying we have Wi-Fi 6, and they're not going to call it out as we have 802.11ax. They're going to call it out as a marketing term. We have Wi-Fi 6, and the consumer, when the iPhone launch comes, we hope later on this year, the consumer is going to start going down the list saying who's got what. This is going to put Apple in a very, very, very tight spot, because their phones are not going to be Wi-Fi 6 compliant, or they're not going to be Wi-Fi 6. They're going to be 802.11ax. And I wonder if this is not the Wi-Fi Alliance's way of strong-arming Apple into the Wi-Fi Alliance program for certification. Because if Samsung comes out with a Wi-Fi 6 phone, the market is going to say, well, then why doesn't Apple have a Wi-Fi 6 phone? And that could just be damaging enough to Apple's sales to justify Apple being pulled back into the Wi-Fi Alliance conversation. I think it was an interesting move from the Wi-Fi Alliance perspective, and I think that as these pieces start to come together, it was maybe a bit of a masterful move on their part to bring one of the leading device manufacturers in the world today back sort of into the fold from a Wi-Fi Alliance perspective.
It's interesting that you say that about Apple, and I know that to be true. What I find really intriguing is the fact that Apple is part of the Wi-Fi Alliance. So they are a member of the Wi-Fi Alliance, even though they aren't certifying their devices by the Wi-Fi Alliance. That's a really interesting point.
It'll be interesting to see so we typically expect iPhone launches to come in the fall at some point.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see. We'll hear the Android fanboys, I'm sure, screaming about how all the features are being stole from Samsung. We will see if Apple steals Wi-Fi 6 from Samsung, and I think that A, they're going to have to, and B, that means that basically all mobile devices being launched in 2019 are Wi-Fi 6.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right there. There's certainly other vendors out there, right? There's Google themselves have the Pixel. LG still produces Android devices. All of there are those other competitors, but
yeah, Microsoft produces
right.
nothing.
Yeah, I was going to say not anymore. But for them to compete at this point,
right.
Once this phone hits, for anyone to compete in the market, they're going to have that branding. And what's interesting is we're almost going to be in the reverse of where we've been for the last, we'll call it last year, where we're going to have Wi-Fi 6 compliant and Wi-Fi 6 certified devices without Wi-Fi 6 networks to support them. So for the next, I would say, year, probably, we're going to be in a situation where it is marketing. Wi-Fi 6 is marketing that Apple, that Samsung, that all of them will use, and they're going to be touting those features. But 99.5% of the wireless networks that they're attaching to
aren't going to.
aren't going to. So it's really interesting to watch this flip that's taking place there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, Sam, I know everyone is excited to find out who won the first LinkSprinter, so let's go ahead and cover that. Believe it or not, we actually, using some randomly generated number, we checked out the first person that was selected by that number, and he had not followed all of the steps. So we had to move on. A second randomly generated number gave us, wait for it, Aaron Lamy. Aaron, who's on Twitter at Aaron_Lamy, followed all the steps. That was, he subscribed to the channel, he left a comment, he followed us on Twitter and commented to us on Twitter on why he should win. Congratulations, Aaron, and we're sorry to that other person who did not, who missed out on the opportunity. You got halfway there, you didn't follow through. We will be in touch with you, Aaron, to get you the equipment, get an address, and I'll be shipping that out to you shortly. Okay, folks, this week the game changes a little bit. To be qualified, you still have to be subscribed to the channel and following Center Freaks on Twitter. But the important part is you need to leave a comment below with your favorite tip or trick for troubleshooting. Now, this can be something that is more well known, that it's just like your constant fallback, or maybe it's something that you thought up and for one particular purpose, but it just continues to keep coming back up and being useful. Whatever that might look like, comment below, and while you're there, be certain to give other comments that you see that you like the ideas. Give them that thumbs up as well. This is all about community. It's about learning from one another and being able and being willing to contribute into the community. So make certain you're doing that in the comments. So that's the way you enter this week. Sam and I'll be taking a look at this, and next week, next Wednesday the 13th, is when we will actually choose the winner, so that we can get this video edited and posted online the 14th, Thursday, because Sam and I both head off to WLPC on Friday the 15th. So your deadline again is Wednesday the 13th to get those comments in, get your votes in for other people, and get people to vote for you, and we'll see you in the comments.
All right. Well, we've got one last topic that I kind of wanted to touch on. On Twitter, as we've told you guys, we'll often be looking for things that are happening there, and there's really an interesting conversation going on. It's really coming out of some screenshots that Helge Keck posted. I believe I've got his first name right. He's on Twitter at Helge Keck, HelgeKeck. And he's posted some pictures of a application that he's writing for Windows, and he's calling it WinFi. And the interesting conversations really have kind of come about from people, and I know that Eddie was one of them, who kind of noticed that there were some very very real similarities to Wi-Fi Explorer Pro that we all know Adrian, and really Wi-Fi Explorer and Wi-Fi Explorer Pro. There's two products there that our friend Adrian produces for Apple. So there's two sides of the discussion here. One of those is Adrian currently is not releasing Wi-Fi Explorer Pro for Windows, right? So there's an untapped market, I guess you could say there. There's no direct competition. And you can argue both sides of that, and I think we will. So the other discussion to be had is whether the common elements that we see in all channel scanning tools equal, those components of the recipe always create the same recipe, right? Yeah. Because it was noticed that there's a lot of very similar attributes between the two, and I'm curious. First, Sam, give me your take on this. What have you seen it, and what's your take?
I saw the screenshots posted on Twitter, of course, and I don't have a Windows machine handy, thank God, to actually try it on. I suppose I could muster one up somewhere, but I have not yet seen it firsthand. But I think you hit the nail square on the head, which is, at some point you expect a word processor to look like a word processor. You look like a spreadsheet application to look like a spreadsheet application. And so I don't know if that's I don't know if Adrian understands maybe that he has led the charge in sort of setting the de facto standard about how we as consumers expect these tools to work. Much like Microsoft set the stage, or Corel or Aldus or whomever built word processors back in the day, right? That UI, or the way that the tools work, in order for them to be accessible, you almost have to imitate somebody else. And so imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, they say. And so when I look at tools that come out on the market that look like other people's tools, I have to ask myself, okay, what was the intention behind that? Was the intention to fill a gap in the market, as we've said, because it's a Windows application? B, does it actually do the same things that Wi-Fi Explorer Pro does? Do I get packet level analysis? Can I look at the headers of the frames that are being captured? Can I look at things like CCX extensions? Can I, there's a, Wi-Fi Explorer is a very, very powerful, very, very unassuming application, and it, you sort of have to spend a few minutes with it before you realize, oh, there's way more to this than just a channel scanner. And so I'll be curious to see if this WinFi is just a channel scanner, like NetStumbler days gone by, or if it's or if there's actually a lot of meat and potatoes behind the way this thing works. That, and I don't know that I've heard necessarily comment from Adrian on it, but I'd love to hear what he has to say, because in this market there's always oh, I saw this idea from somebody else and so I turned it into a product, or I did, there's always people robbing or borrowing or professionally agreeing that, hey, you can have this idea, or please don't use this idea, and there's always this sort of push and pull when products come to market about who robbed what idea from who improved on what idea from whom else. And I guess I'm probably more concerned about what Adrian has to say about it. Not hey, Adrian, are you okay with this guy building a tool? Because it's certainly a free market, and certainly one that Adrian up to this point hasn't played in. But I'd be curious to see what he has to say about setting the tone for imitation being a form of flattery as opposed to flat out copying a tool.
It's funny you say that. He actually did post. And
I just missed it.
Well, that's okay. This was only about 12 hours ago. He kind of posted a few tweets about this, and actually engaged a little bit with Helge. I think it kind of gets summed up a little bit, and I'll post some of these up. But it kind of gets summed up a little bit when he says, I don't mind if the app, referring to Wi-Fi Explorer, serves as an inspiration to others the same way others have been an inspiration to my work, right? So I think he definitely calls out exactly what you're talking about with, a word processor is a word processor is a word processor, and they're going to have those common elements. But I do think that basing the development of the app entirely on the design of Wi-Fi Explorer is not cool. And I think he's kind of calling out what others are seeing. And again, he wasn't the one that started this conversation. He didn't come in and as soon as that gets posted, say, hey, there's a problem here. He's I think calling out the same thing that a lot of others saw and commented on first. But he does go further, and he says, instead, I believe we should always strive for building applications that use as much that use as much as possible different and clever UI solutions. It's good for the community and pushes us developers to improve existing apps as well. So I think, I think and there's multiple tweets there. Everyone should go check it out and should definitely take a look at the screenshots and see what you think. Tag us, at Center Freaks and let us know, what you think. Looking at screenshots again, I'm like you, Sam. I don't have a Windows device that I log into very often. So I haven't actually played with it, but at least from just purely from a UI, screenshots, it is very, very similar.
Very similar, yeah.
And for those of us that have used Wi-Fi Explorer, over the last 3 years or however long it's, especially the Pro version, however long it's been around, it's been a couple. What we've seen is it iterate, right? We've seen these iterative changes and improvements and things being added. And a lot of that has to do with the feedback that Adrian's been given from the community. And it's taken a lot of work for him to kind of refine that vision of the app. And so it is kind of interesting to see, an app that comes in and looks an awful lot right out of the box. And I do kind of question it. I agree with you. We all iterate on each other, right? And Adrian says that. But if I'm iterating on you and I'm taking something that you've done in the past, when I came back from WLPC and I took the Odroid and went, it's got spec tools on it, but I wanted the new version of spec tools on it. I was iterating on what someone else did, but it was their product I was iterating, right?
Right.
I wasn't
making
saying,
a new product,
hey,
yeah.
Right. I wasn't. This isn't the WLAN Pi. This is the WLAN Spy, right? Because now I can look at,
right.
I mean, I was saying, hey, here's something we can do to, here's a way, right? It also brings up the interesting question, and this is kind of the last I'll say on it. Brings up the interesting question: if Adrian ever decided to release a Windows application, right? There would immediately be two very similar Windows applications that look very similar. But as you said, Adrian has done an incredible job of building a very deep application. And would there be confusion between them? And I think when you start to say, I believe there would be confusion, I believe that's when maybe the line's been crossed. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that the only thing that I guess I look at it from my own personal perspective or my own personal experience is, the Wi-Fi Explorer Pro is a great application. B, Adrian's a great developer. I can think of two instances in the past, probably 60 days, where I told Adrian, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if the application did this?" And in one instance, he had the feature that I requested, which was a copy and paste feature, done within about a week. And then the second feature I asked him, I said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had some airport utility integration? And he said, yeah, in fact, we already do, and here's how it works. And so when I look at the rapid pace of development that he has and the way that he engages with the community, that's incredibly valuable to me. And I look at, I recommend Wi-Fi Explorer Pro all day long to everybody who's got a Mac. It's an incredibly powerful tool, and I almost think he may undercharge just a little bit for it. Don't tell him I said that. But when I look
just between you and me, Sam.
Just between you and I. Yeah, exactly. When I look at the WinFi app, I'm going to be curious, right? What's he going to charge for it? How is he going to stay engaged in the community? Is he going to show up at WPC and engage, people and work with Adrian to make sure that there's, clear delineation in the market? And if the agreement is, hey, that's why we have licensing and royalty programs, right? If there is such a dramatic overlap, then if indeed he is copying those elements, then maybe Adrian needs to hire him as a developer for the Windows platform, and maybe he just needs to build Wi-Fi Explorer Pro for Windows instead of WinFi, I think is the name of it, right? There's a lot of clean ways out of it, and I think that even if he did that and he said, hey, not only feel free to copy all my stuff, in fact, change your name, you own the product, and let's work together, right? And that's certainly one way forward. Although that's obviously up to Adrian and Helge. But I think there's a lot of clean ways out of this, and I'd hate to see another instance of infighting in the community, and we don't need that for sure. And so, absolutely. I hope that that they're in communication with each other, and if my opinion matters, I'd love to see them both successful.
And with that, we'll bring episode number 2 to an end. We've had a lot of content, and there's been a lot of good discussion here, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that discussion continues on Twitter. Don't forget that we've got those giveaways, and we're looking forward to hearing from you guys. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you again very shortly. Have a great week.
See ya.